This is open mic night of the living dead. And so far, we've survived Ghostface, Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees, exorcisms, neighborly vampires, death itself, psychological trauma, and Norman Bates, among others. But for the first time, we're discussing a movie I'm not so certain we would survive as a family.
I feel called out.
That's right. This week, we're talking about A Quiet Place.
The creature's creeping right behind you. I hope you finally find a little slice of peace and light. 'Cause it comes crashing down tonight. Welcome to the open mic. When we call your name, you'll die. But there's no need to dread. This is the open mic night of the living dead.
All right.
Okay, that was pretty good. I'm sorry that I spoke in the middle of your cold open, but I do feel called out and personally attacked.
Well, it's not just you that would get us all killed. Maybe your genetics.
Maybe my genetics. Even our animals are loud.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We discussed this
Yes.
during the film. We would have to take the animals somewhere far away very quickly.
I would kiss them and say goodbye. We would not survive with them nearby.
But I don't even know. I'm not sure how we would get rid of them in a way that would be safe. You know what I mean? Like, how would I take them?
Right.
Like, I would have to walk with them. Ted's going to bark at
everything
person he sees, every monster in the woods.
He would be scooped up so fast.
We would just have to keep him at a distance, I guess. Lock him in a room in the house we don't care about. What room would we care about least if a monster tore it apart? These are the questions that this movie raises.
Anyway, I'm Rachel.
I'm John. We are a married couple who
couldn't tell.
Who would not survive.
Nope.
A Quiet Place.
Nope.
And this is one of our deep dive episodes. We're going to be talking in depth about A Quiet Place. So this is your spoiler warning. If you haven't seen A Quiet Place yet, you're missing out. So pause this real quick if you want to see it before hearing all what we have to say.
Yeah. All right. Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert has been given. Also, content warning on this one, but child death.
Right.
Is dealt with in this film pretty extensively. It's kind of one of the foundational pieces of the whole narrative. So if that's something that's hard for you, then maybe skip this episode or go listen to another one.
But I was saying, I think this is our first PG-13 movie we're covering.
I think you're right. I did not go back and check every single movie that we've covered on a deep dive episode yet.
And if I'm wrong, I'm sorry. Let me know in the comments. We need the action.
Let's know anything in the comments.
And this just goes to show that a movie doesn't have to have a hard R rating to be engrossing and just phenomenal.
Yeah, I was surprised that I hadn't watched this movie since it came out because I feel like I've seen it a bunch of times, but I think it's just so good and so well told, the story, that it stayed with me for the last 8 years because I think I've only ever watched it the first time we watched it.
Wow. And that was in our old apartment.
Yeah.
Back in 2018. It must have been right when it hit streaming.
Yep.
I had a little TV set up we had the second and third floor of an apartment building. And I had this little space where we would watch TV at night when the kids had fallen asleep if they did.
Have the whole second and third floor. We did have the whole third floor.
Right.
You said apartment building. That makes it sound really big. It was not really big. It was really small.
Yes. No.
But you had upstairs as kind of your office hangout space, and that's where we would watch movies together and hang out.
Yeah, now I'm allowed in the living room. We didn't even have a living room. Our bedroom was the living room.
Yeah, that was something else.
And I just remember the early days after we moved to our house and the kids wanting to go back. And I was like, you don't want to go back.
This is way better.
This is way better.
There's enough rooms for everybody. There's more rooms than there are people, which we did not have in the old apartment.
Right. And I would say that where we live now would certainly up our chances in this world of A Quiet Place for sure.
Agreed.
Because before we were kind of in a city, a New England city.
Oh, yeah.
That was not Boston, so not really a city.
Not really a city. Only a city by New England standards.
Certainly. Like 40,000 people or so. But now we're in a more rural area. I'm trying new voices, not just for as like a shtick, but for life.
You got to do something, to keep things fresh and exciting. I have a summary of this movie.
Fantastic.
A family struggles to survive in a post-apocalyptic world overrun by blind alien creatures that hunt entirely by sound, forcing them to communicate in near total silence.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, that's good, right? Nice and short.
It fails to mention that they live in a rural area.
It does.
Sorry, I made myself laugh on that one, and it's not even funny. Good. Off to a good start. Well, let me tell you about the distribution and reception of this movie. It came out, was released, as they say. The big wigs, they say released. They don't say came out.
Right.
It came out, oh, damn it. It was released on April 6th of 2018. It has a tight runtime of 90 minutes. And it was distributed by Paramount Pictures. And for as long as I've known, it's always streaming on Paramount Plus. So if you're looking for a place to watch it and you have that streaming service, or you can get like a free trial, definitely worth checking it out there. Also, I think the other sequels are there as well. This movie was directed by John Krasinski. That's right. Jim Halpert from The Office lost his job at the paper store factory place, moved to upstate New York. Wait, no, I've gotten the man and the character confused in my own head. But anyway, John Krasinski directed this. The story is by Brian Woods and Scott Beck. And then John Krasinski joined up in sort of the writing of the screenplay. It contributed some revisions and stuff like that. I'll get to that in a bit. The box office for this movie was phenomenal. The budget's reportedly around $17 to $21 million, and in the worldwide box office, it made about $341 million.
I want to say, I feel like that's a low budget for the quality of the special effects in this film.
Good point. And I'm not sure. You'll have to tell me more about that when we get to special effects, but
it also had a very small cast.
Right.
And it was all shot on...
I was going to say, when I get
Yeah. That makes sense, I guess. I hadn't looked at the budget numbers, but that's my first instinct, is given how high quality the special effects were, it surprises me that this was so cheaply made, but also really great performance in terms of, as you said, performed phenomenally at the box office.
Well, and I do think it is considered like a mid-budget horror movie. And of course, so $341 million against $20 million budget is a huge success. And the other sort of notable things about it being such a huge success, especially in 2018, is that it was original intellectual property, or IP as we say. And also, even though it was a horror movie, it definitely has serious mainstream crossover appeal. And of course, it launched a franchise. I don't know if we're getting more movies out of it, but so far we have 3.
There's A Quiet Place, A Quiet Place 2, and A Quiet Place Day 1. Mm-hmm. I didn't go down this rabbit hole, but that there is a third movie coming out in 2027.
A third sequel, yeah.
Right. No.
Fantastic.
Yes, a third sequel, A Quiet Place 3, so not a prequel.
Oh.
Because there's been A Quiet Place, so it would be a second sequel.
Gotcha.
Because Quiet Place Day 1 is really a prequel.
Right.
Which is also so cool. Not a lot of our movies have that.
At least not in this genre. In terms of awards and recognition, I mean, it definitely got more praise than some horror movies, and it was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Sound Editing. And that was so important to this film, obviously, which we'll get into, but the sound design was not just background craft in this movie. It was the central mechanic of the movie and became...
Do you hear him?
Ted's growling. He's getting us killed right now.
Stop. Ted, you're proving the point. Okay. And we're dead. Are you proud of yours? He's trying to kill us.
The sound design became part of the public conversation around the film. And this is one of the rare mainstream horror movies where sound design was part of the hook, the marketing, the suspense, and the audience behavior. It is one where I wish we had seen it in theaters, because that probably would have been a really cool experience, especially if you had the right audience. I think it's one of those things where if you like go into a room and there's a person in there and they just start whispering to you, you sort of automatically whisper back, even if you don't know. You might say, "Why are we whispering?"
Right.
But the mechanics of this movie really has that effect of like drawing you to the edge of your seat. You're leaning in because it's quieter and because everybody else is silent most of the time. It kind of, I don't know, it has a more engrossing effect, right?
Yes.
Overall, the critical reception was very positive. It was commonly praised for the suspense, the restraint, the sound design, performances, emotional family drama, use of silence, Krasinski's direction, and theatrical experience. But the common criticisms were world-building logic, creature rule questions, premise nitpicks, which I'll get into a little bit at the end of Murder Mayhem, and whether their survival setup holds up if analyzed too literally. And in terms of some mixed or critical reviews of this movie, we have Owen Gleiberman of Variety, who said A Quiet Place is a tautly original, genre-bending exercise, technically sleek and accomplished, with some vivid, scary moments, but he also said it was a little too in love with the stoned logic of its own premise. David Edelstein of New York Magazine and Vulture said the movie works so well moment to moment that you may not notice the holes until afterward. But in terms of the positive reception, we have Peter Travers at Rolling Stone, who said A Quiet Place is a triumph of tight, tantalizing suspense. This new horror classic will fry your nerves to a frazzle. Rotten Tomatoes says that A Quiet Place artfully plays on elemental fears with a ruthlessly intelligent creature feature that's as original as it is scary, and establishes director John Krasinski as a rising talent. Richard Roper at Chicago Sun-Times said the concept is brilliant in its simplicity, and the execution is superb. And Brian Tellerico, Rachel's favorite friend at RogerEbert.com, said Krasinski proves himself to be an assured filmmaker. A Quiet Place wasn't the only movie to come out in 2018. In fact, 2018 was a very strong year for horror and film in general. And of course, this was still a time when streaming was increasing in its popularity in terms of watching movies. And it's crazy to think of how much streaming has sort of become the main way we watch movies now, unfortunately, from my point of view. You know, since the pandemic started in 2020, that's when the real push, that's when you started to see a lot of bigger original movies to just land on streaming services and maybe not get their theatrical debut. So back in 2018, movie theaters were still a lot bigger than they are now. In terms of horror, the genre was thriving in several lanes at once. You had the prestige or elevated horror, which, if you want to hear us talk about that, check out our Smile episode. We had a lot of those types of movies rising up in the pool of horror movies. Also mainstream studio horror and franchise revival. There were also some Indian art house horror, sci-fi horror, and horror-adjacent thrillers were thriving during that time. A Quiet Place stands out because, again, it was original IP. It had a clean, high-concept hook, but kept it all simple, which was something that we really commented on, right, after we watched it. And it crossed over to mainstream audiences and was a theatrical event. It made silence and sound design central selling points, and it was accessible to non-horror diehards. which I think was really huge in its success overall.
I am actually right now going to add A Quiet Place to my horror movies for horror haters list on Letterboxd because I think I think that's a really good point about this movie is that even if folks are not into horror, the things that make this horror are not so overwhelming that they wouldn't work for people who hate horror.
It is scary, though.
It is scary, yes, but it's not gory. It implies a lot of gore. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
But no, that's really interesting. I'm still adding it to my list.
So if Rachel and I were heading out to the theaters in 2018, what other horror movies could we have seen? Hereditary. Halloween 2018. So the David Gordon Green Halloween, the first of the new trilogy. The Suspiria remake on Amazon. So I'm not sure if that had a theatrical release or not. But anyway, Mandy, which we saw, Nick Cage, Annihilation, which we also saw, Overlord, which has been on our personal wheel for a long time, but we've never spun it, The Ritual, Upgrade, Unsane, which I've never heard of, The Strangers Pray at Night, which I really enjoyed, Possum, and The House That Jack Built, which is also currently on our wheel. I've seen it, you have not. It has Matt Dillon as a serial killer.
Oh, that suits him.
And that's not a spoiler. That's you kind of watch the movie from his perspective. So some other films that came out in 2018 that were not horror. We have Ryan Coogler's Black Panther, Avengers Infinity War, Mission Impossible, Fallout, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, A Star is Born, Roma, Green Book, Bohemian Rhapsody, First Man, and Crazy Rich Asians. So strong year for horror and film in general. But that's all I have really on distribution and reception. Let's talk about ratings.
Let's do it. This is consistently highly ranked across the board in the places that we generally look at ratings. And I think this emphasizes the fact that this is horror for horror haters, right? That this is something that usually horror movies tend to skew lower because so many people just are uncomfortable with the genre. This was a 7.5 on IMDb, 96% tomato meter on Rotten Tomatoes, which is pretty high. And then Letterboxd, 3.6. My personal rating, which is on a 5-star system, recently revamped, but this movie has a 4. This is, which for me has a very specific definition at this point. What did you give it?
Well, right after we finished it, I said to you it's an easy 8.
Yep.
But I've actually watched this at least one other time between when we first watched it and this most recent viewing. And I gave it an 8.5 that time, but also my rating system has sort of evolved over time. And so I think between an 8 and 8.5 makes sense for me. I mean, it is really solid.
It is. And I think that we can speak later about what. So for me, a 4 is better than most, enthusiastically recommend, remember fondly, would watch again in the right mood, brilliantly crafted. And a 4.5, just slightly better, fantastic, almost perfect, would watch again happily, exceptionally crafted. And I think the only thing for me is some of those inconsistencies that I found myself thinking about a little bit too much during the movie that distract me, keep it from being a 4.5.
Yeah.
And
I don't buy into some of those now that I've thought about it more. And we'll talk about that later. But some of that stuff doesn't really bother me as much, especially in this circumstance, because I think, well, we'll get to it later.
Right. No, I think it's interesting because I could lean towards a 4.5 on this, but that's almost a perfect movie for me. And this is a really tight little movie.
Yeah. And on the Smile, I think I gave Smile a 7.5 and that it didn't quite reach an 8 for me. Because for me, the 8 is really a new tier sort of in my personal rating system. That's when it gets into really, really super solid, top of the line entertainment movies. But what about our open mic night of the Living Dead patent pending?
There's no patent pending. Have you filled out the application?
No, I'm not sure that listen, don't pick apart my plot holes, baby.
I've been picking apart plot holes all week. I call this a high 2.
Yeah, high 2. I was tempted almost to make it a 3.
For a moment, I was thinking low 3, but I think I it's not quite at a Psycho, or what else have we rated out of 3?
Exorcist.
The Thing. Yeah, this isn't quite there.
We'll see in 20 years.
That's true. And I think, I think I can't wait to see. The third one does come out next July, by the way. I did just confirm that while we were looking at that. So I'm looking forward to seeing the franchise as a whole in 15 or 20 years. Great point.
And, well, also, I feel like this gets slept on a little bit in the horror community right now. Maybe it is the PG-13 aspect of it, or I'm not sure what it is. You don't hear about it as often as you think you might after you've just watched it. I
think it's a film that almost everybody has seen in the horror space. So there's very few people who haven't seen it. And I think because it is simple, it's a simple premise, right? I think the world building has captured audience imagination more than the film itself. I think that like the world of A Quiet Place has overshadowed the film A Quiet Place in kind of the cultural conversation around the film. It's more about like, oh, if the monster's from The Quiet Place. Like, I think I see that referenced more than I do the movie itself. And so I wonder if that's part of it, is that the world it creates is so appealing that it kind of overshadows the filmmaking. And I'm glad we get to talk about both today.
Well, should we make a movie?
Yeah, I think we should.
Let's make a movie.
Let's make a movie. We'll make sure that it's spooky. I sure hope that it's groovy. Let's make a movie.
All right. I'm going to talk about some key personnel here. And first and foremost, probably most obviously, is John Krasinski, who was born on October 20th, 1979 in Newton, Massachusetts.
Ooh. Sorry, I grew up right near there.
You didn't know that?
I didn't know that he was from Newton. No, I used to do districts with kids from Newton.
Well, yeah, and him and...
Wait a second, what year was he born?
1979.
We were in high school at the same time. I bet I knew kids who went to school with him.
Maybe, unless he went to like some private school.
Unless he went to private school, but
which I don't have that information here.
Newton had 2 high schools.
But he was also, I can't believe I'm drawing a blank on it. Right, the guy who plays Ryan in The Office.
Oh yeah, that guy.
He also grew up with...
I'm not a huge Office fan. I'm not an anti-fan. I just never watched it as much as you have.
But he's also from Newton, and he wrote a lot of the shows. And I think that they were friends growing up, potentially.
That makes sense.
This is not about The Office.
Nope, it's not.
That would be funny, though, if they did like a mashup of The Office and A Quiet Place. Just having Steve Carell just trying to keep everybody quiet, but making the most noise out of everybody.
Probably. Yeah, that makes sense.
He studied English at Brown University, and he trained at the National Theatre Institute. And of course, his early public identity, which I mentioned earlier, he's best known as Jim Halpert on The Office, widely associated with comedy, charm, and workplace sitcom naturalism. And really, we talked about this recently. I think we both saw videos online around the same time about sort of the shift in advertising. What do they call it? Like millennial advertising? I don't know what they call it. Maybe they don't call it anything, but a lot of people attribute sort of the change in tone in advertising, sort of the nonchalant, relaxed sort of, how would you describe it?
Kind of a little more deadpan, a little less excitement, and here it is now. And instead kind of a naturalistic, conversational, the guy across in the other cubicle from you, just chatting about their day.
Because he got picked up and did a lot of voiceovers for ads, and then and he really just delivered it very conversationally.
Yes.
And that trend kind of picked up, and we still see a lot of that today. But A Quiet Place was not his it was not his directorial debut. He directed a movie called Brief Interviews with Hideous Men, which, I am personally touched in a positive sense that I was not called upon to be in Brief Interviews with Hideous Men. I think it's a good sign. But that movie came out in 2009. I've not seen it. It was adapted from David Foster Wallace material. And then he directed a movie in 2016 called The Haulers. And that was a family dramedy. But neither of those changed his public identity the way A Quiet Place did. A Quiet Place showed he can control tone, tension, emotional drama, genre mechanics, and visual storytelling. And then in terms of the writers, we have Brian Woods and Scott Beck. And they wrote the story and the screenplay. The screenplay they wrote along with John Krasinski. They're longtime writing and directing partners who grew up together in Iowa. They began making films together as kids and young teens. And their general creative identity contained concepts like high concept horror thriller premises, survival pressure, moral psychological tension, and limited environment storytelling. So A Quiet Place really fits this mold that they sort of created for themselves and fits their strengths. It has a simple premise, strong behavioral rules, minimal exposition, visual storytelling, and high-stakes family pressure. And in terms of other works by Becks and Woods, they wrote and directed Nightlight in 2015, which is a found footage wood set horror that I've not seen. They directed and wrote Haunt from 2019, which we've watched. It is a Halloween haunted attraction slasher. We watched that like within the last year and a half or so. Rachel's shaking her head. She doesn't remember it.
I don't remember it at all.
The group of friends goes to like haunted attraction and there's killers in there with masks or a killer. That's not to avoid a spoiler. I genuinely don't completely remember.
I vaguely remember.
But that movie is often liked by horror fans as a lean, nasty, efficient genre piece. They also wrote and directed 65, the sci-fi survival film starring Adam Driver. And they wrote and directed Heretic from 2024.
Oh, I didn't know that. I liked Heretic a lot.
I know you did. They also had some involvement in the Stephen King adaptation, The Boogeyman. They had some production and story involvement, but they were not...
Which I refuse to watch.
We'll get there eventually.
Because this short story scared the crap out of me and I don't want to see it on film.
Now, in terms of this movie, the screenplay, it's a very original screenplay and it has a really core writing challenge to it. How do you tell a story with minimal dialogue? They had to communicate backstory, motivation, grief, family dynamics, rules of their world, and survival behavior through action, visual cues, environment, silence, sign language, and family behavior. And we've talked about this before, but really, and if you watch any videos sort of about movie making or storytelling in general, you often hear people say, show me, don't tell me.
Show, don't tell.
Show, don't tell. And this movie might be like a masterpiece in that.
I was just thinking about how to incorporate this into my writing curriculum because one of my units is show, don't tell, or showing versus telling is what it's called, and just identifying the difference between that. And I often use films when I'm discussing examples because it is easier to show than tell in a film because it's visual. But when you're thinking about writing a screenplay, you're thinking about a lot of times the showing is not included in a screenplay, right? Because it's so much of a screenplay is often dialogue. I don't know. I haven't read a lot of screenplays.
No, there are some of the main actions are included that if you're writing the screenplay, if there's something specific, you usually include it. But yeah, just the challenge though of a movie that basically has like the tiniest bit of dialogue and to so successfully build a world and show a whole story arc of a family, to me is incredible. In terms of Krasinski's revisions and contributions, he did not radically rewrite the film from scratch. Woods and Beck have generally emphasized that Krasinski protected the original idea and preserved much of the original version. And what Krasinski brought most strongly was the parenthood emphasis, the family emotional core and their relationship dynamics, character stakes, and certain world building details. Like some of the reported additions, or like the sand paths, the red warning lights, stuff like that. And so these are not just cool survival details. They become the visual grammar of the movie. They let the world explain itself without exposition.
Yeah, really, really masterful writing.
Like, is there any exposition in this film? I don't think there's...
Like verbal exposition, you mean even in sign language? I'm not sure there is.
Like, I don't think at any time somebody explains anything about
the world.
Nope.
And yet the world building is the thing that has made this film, I think, part of the cultural conversation, even though it is a movie about family and guilt and loss and all those other things, even more than it is. But the world that was created was just so vivid, and it's done in a fairly short amount of time. Only 90 minutes, like 91, right? Real short movie.
The reason, or at least the major reason it sounds like Krasinski was drawn to this project was because he connected to the material through being a parent. I think in one of the interviews I saw, his daughter was still very young. He was still really in the early stages of parenthood.
It was their second child. She was like really, really young. And he was in the midst of all of the fear that comes with having a newborn.
Yes, and he's described the film as a love letter to my kids.
There is, in the show notes, linked I didn't even link everything. I just linked all the pieces that I thought were really interesting. But he wrote about the whole process himself in one of those. There's an article that he wrote about directing the film and talks a lot about this stuff. So if you're interested in that, please check out the show notes and check out some of those articles. They're really good.
And so really effectively, he was drawn to the fact that the monster's the hook, but parenthood is the engine. And the movie's not only asking how do you survive monsters, and this theme came up multiple times in the movie, how do you protect your kids in a world where you cannot protect them from everything?
Which is the world that exists because you cannot protect your kids from everything.
Right.
I mean, obviously we don't have monsters that kill by sound, but there's a lot of stuff out there. And I think our generation, and we are the same generation as these two parents, almost the same age. I think for us, we try very hard to protect our kids from things that previous generations perhaps just accepted as part of the danger of being alive. And the last few generations of parents, I think, are having a harder time with that. So yeah, the best horror hits us right where it hurts.
Lastly, before I let you dig into the cast, there was one other key personnel person who I wanted to mention, although I think there really was a team, but Douglas Ridloff was the deaf mentor and consultant and American Sign Language support person, because as you'll get into, Millicent Simmons, who plays Reagan, is truly deaf in real life. So the cast members learn sign language. Krasinski said the cast learned sign language for every line in the script, but I'll get a little bit more into some of that in the production section.
Great. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, let's talk about the cast. We've already talked about John Krasinski, and we don't have to say anything more because we've already discussed him and his background in terms of what he's known for and what he did previously. We've got his real-life wife, Emily Blunt, as Evelyn Abbott. She was born in 1983. She is from London. Her father's a barrister. Isn't that a lawyer?
I think so.
And mother was an actress and teacher. She herself overcame a severe childhood stammer through acting and has worked with the American Institute for Stuttering since 2006. And she says that working through her stutter actually was foundational to her career as an actor. Her stage debut was alongside Dame Judi Dench in The Royal Family at the Haymarket Theatre in 2001. So she is both a stage and a film actress. Her big international breakthrough, she got the Golden Globe in 2006 for BBC's Gideon's Daughter, and then also was in The Devil Wears Prada in 2006 opposite Meryl Streep. And that was where she kind of first came onto the scene, I guess. She does have a long history in genre and sci-fi films. So Edge of Tomorrow, 2014, which we really enjoyed. We watched that last year, I think. Sicario, which I've seen and really liked, would like to watch again. Into the Woods, 2014, was great. She played the baker's wife. She was also Mary Poppins Returns. She was in Oppenheimer, 2023. She got her first Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actress. She's really great. I love her in pretty much everything I've seen her in. She did win a SAG award for this, as you mentioned. And she and John Krasinski have been married since 2010. They held their ceremony at George Clooney's estate in Italy. So tight with Clooney. She, at first, was more of a support for her husband, read the script, was kind of encouraging him to direct it and into it. And then she read the script at the point where it was on a plane and then told him, I need to do this film. And so once she joined, it looks like they worked through the script and discussed every shot in pre-production. So a lot of the work for this film happened at home. And as, you know, I think we can really relate to working on a creative project with your spouse, how rewarding it is, but also how I imagine that it also meant like that's all they were talking about for a while, right? But I know that when I talk about making this podcast with you, dear, one of the things I always say is how special it is for us to be able to do something that we love and talk about something that we love and make music together and have this final creative project to look at the end of it, right? Like there's this record of this beautiful thing that we've made. I mean, we think it's beautiful. I'm not, you don't have to think it's beautiful, but it's really, and I really appreciate that. And that's what I was thinking of when I was reading about how they worked on this movie together behind the scenes and of course on camera.
And I hadn't mentioned her SAG award. I didn't.
Oh, I thought you did.
No,
my bad.
I just mentioned the Academy Award nomination for the sound design.
Oh, right.
But that makes sense to me because I was going to say if anybody deserves an award for this movie, it's certainly Emily Blunt and her performance. I mean, she really, and Krasinski himself said that she raised the game for the movie.
She came into this, and I think also as a mother, resonating very strongly with her character. And we'll talk more about this when we hit characters. But I think Emily Blunt, I think the two of them made a film no two others could make together, both on and off screen. Yeah, I already talked about John Krasinski as Lee Abbott. The home on set was decorated with real family photographs of Krasinski and Blunt's actual children, which I thought was kind of cool and figured I would mention it at that point. We've got Millicent Simmons, often goes by Millie, as Reagan Abbott. She was born in 2003 in South Dakota. She is deaf in real life. Her primary language is American Sign Language, as you mentioned. She also uses a cochlear implant in real life, the same as the character Reagan. She attended Jean Massieu School of the Deaf and started performing at School Drama Club and played Puck in A Midsummer Night's Dream. So acting has been a part of her life for a very long time. She had her film debut in Wonderstruck in 2017. And then when Krasinski was looking for a deaf actor to play this role, he called George Clooney, and Clooney told him that he needed to put Millie in this movie. She's the first deaf actor nominated for a Critics' Choice Award for Wonderstruck, and then won and got a second Critics' Choice nomination for A Quiet Place in 2018, the following year. Krasinski has said that casting a deaf actress was a non-negotiable for him, which we'll talk about that a little more later, but he said, I wanted to have someone who could not only understand the world of this character, but also help me to understand, someone I could learn from. And so she also directly shaped this film by being a part of the cast, which I think is a really interesting piece of learning about how this movie was made, was that the actors had such an influence on the world of the movie. She directly shaped the script, the sound design, and the authenticity of ASL, and she and advisor Douglas Ridloff were integral to the production. I did find out her favorite horror movie is Parasite, which I thought was cool. And she had her Broadway debut in 2023, starring opposite Laurie Metcalf in Grey House. And she has described Quiet Place films as a corrective to the long history of deaf characters being played by hearing actors. She has been very vocal about wanting deaf characters to be played by deaf actors. So I think her casting in this movie was obviously brilliant. She's a great actor. We've got Noah Jupe as Marcus Abbott. He was born in 2005, also British. He's from an entertainment family. His father is a filmmaker, I think a producer, and his mother is an actress. He started acting at age 10. We saw him in Penny Dreadful. That was some of his early work. I don't remember him specifically, but he was also in Downton Abbey, and he was on The Night Manager with Tom Hiddleston and Hugh Laurie on the BBC. He was also cast on a recommendation from George Clooney, who directed him in 2 movies. And he learned so much ASL that he became fluent, according to Simmons, who has mentioned it before. He practiced so much that he continues to use it. He recently won critical acclaim, not recently, the year after, for Honey Boy, where he got an Independent Spirit Award. And recently, this is the line I accidentally read, he was in Hamnet and played William Shakespeare. So which of course that movie did well at the Academy Awards. And then finally, you've got Cade Woodward as Beau Abbott, who is killed pretty soon in the film. He showed up in Avengers Endgame and also the TV miniseries Hawkeye as Nathaniel Barton. He was on one episode of Chicago Med, and he played Ralphie Glick in the 2024 Salem's Lot, which we haven't seen yet, right?
Right.
Which was directed by Gary Dauberman, who co-wrote 2017's It, which I just wanted to mention because I'm excited to see that. So yeah, Cade Woodward, not a lot of screen time, but pretty much shapes the whole narrative. So that's it for cast. Small cast. Really small cast.
Yep.
What do you got for production?
Production, in terms of the timeline, filming took place in 2017 over 36 days. I think the whole production was like from May to July or something like that. And the production took place in Dutchess County and Ulster County in New York, plus other locations in New York specifically.
You know what's funny? Sorry, I just have to interrupt. You said May to July, and I was like, no, the Goldenrod wouldn't have been like that in July. And I looked at my notes and it says May to November, which makes more sense. So sorry, my plant nerd self just was like, there's no way it was done in July. That's how much of a nerd I am. Carry on. I feel like you're judging me.
Other major New York locations included Pawling, Beacon, and New Paltz, Wallkill Valley Rail Trail, New York. I might have said that. Some of those are towns, some are locations. You figure it out. Also, the bridge at the beginning was the Springtown Truss Bridge. And then Little Falls, New York was used for the abandoned downtown opening sequence. And so all of this real location, practical location shooting helps the movie avoid the backlot feeling. It feels like a real rural small town world that has gone quiet. And really, in this movie, the environment tells the story. And I just wanted to touch on a few aspects of the production. The Abbott Farm is the heart of the movie. And I'm not sure if we've you were talking about who plays who in the movie. When you're watching the movie, you don't know what the characters' names are until the credits roll.
Yeah, there's no names, which is another really cool thing.
So this is the Abbott family, and you have Lee and Evelyn are the mom and dad, and then you have Reagan, Marcus, and Beau are the children. But the Abbott family farm is the heart of the movie. It functions as their home, their fortress, their grief space, their survival system and communication network. And the production design really makes survival feel like routine, especially, in their home base. In terms of the sand paths, the family walks barefoot on sand paths to reduce noise. And also, I think because they have to walk barefoot in order to sort of guarantee maximum quietness when walking, sand is a little easier on the feet as well. I saw one behind the scenes thing where Millicent Simmons as Reagan, sort of when she's looking for her brother in the cornfield, she has to walk into the cornfield and they're asking her whether she wants them to put down a sand path. And she's testing her feet on it and says it's okay. So it also served functionally to help the actors' feet. But this is one of the most memorable practical world building details that you see at the beginning, right? As soon as they leave that pharmacy, they're walking on this sand path that they've created, and it basically goes where they go. And it works because it's visual, simple, and instantly understandable, and tied directly to the rules of the world and the rules of the monsters.
And one thing I wrote down while watching was I thought there was more to this movie than there is. And it's because when you see those sand paths, you almost remember, you can see them placing the sand paths. Like the implication of that simple sand path is that at some point, the family laid these sand paths down. And so even though we only see 3 days in the life of this family, we feel like we have seen 1.5 years of their lives because we see the results of the past work that they've done. Again, brilliant storytelling. How much more effective is just that sand path that they use to walk from one place to another than even showing the scene of them creating it, right? You imagine it and then it makes you feel like you've lived it, even though you haven't.
And then there's one brief clip, too, that shows Krasinski's character, Lee, sort of refinishing part of the path, like pouring new sand down, which you have to do. Obviously, sometimes it's going to get washed away, and over time, it's not going to be as effective as you need it to be. So that's something that's going to need upkeep. Another aspect of the production design are the red warning lights. They're part of the family's emergency communication system. They warn without sound, and visually they transform the farm into a horror space. So this place that once was the place of comfort now instantly becomes a place of horror, and, you know, which is especially important during the childbirth, basement, danger sequences. So they're both practical world building and horror lighting. Also, you have the basement workshop in the actual farmhouse, which is the survival lab, the research space, the emotional space, and sort of the father-daughter guilt space.
It's also the exposition space because we get all of those newspapers.
Exactly.
That's like the only exposition in words that we get. And it's not spoken, it's just visual.
Right, and there's still not a lot.
No, you still have to. And actually, the names for the creatures come from that space. The commonly agreed upon Death Angels comes from one of the headlines.
Oh.
Yeah, that's like when I was looking into the creature effects, that comes from that space where it shows some of the. And since there have been more films in the series that have given us more exposition, clearly we know more about it, but it is just amazing how richly they build this world just with the production design.
And then real quick on the ASL stuff, American Sign Language, in terms of the production, like I said, Krasinski said the cast learned, you know, every line in the script in sign language. Millicent Simmons helped shape the authenticity. She helped teach the cast members the ASL which influenced how the family communicated. The other thing that I found was really interesting in terms of the sign language, which I didn't think about when we were watching it, but the signing styles among the characters was not generic. So Lee's signing, the father's signing, was more direct, utilitarian, and survival focused. Evelyn, the mom's signing, was more expressive and emotionally open. And then, of course, you have the teenage Bregan, who expresses her teenage defiance and frustration and has sort of more of a sharper emotional edge. So this affects the performance, the story logic, and the sound design, and it makes the family's silent communication feel lived in rather than, you know, a gimmick, which I think is so true. It really does feel so natural. You know, as you were saying, when we were as the movie was starting, really kind of gave them an edge probably when the shit hit the fan, so to speak.
Right, that they would be able to communicate instantly in a situation where many people would be limited by the use of spoken language.
And their production approach was mostly, you know, focused on efficiency, where we don't have a Shining situation here with, what's his name? I can't come up with any Kubrick. Jeez, my brain hurts me. So shot in 36 days, small cast, contained locations, which helped control the budget and kept the emotional focus tight. There was even like on-set sound awareness, which I'll get more into the sound design in a bit. But during the production, the crew became unusually aware of sound, since tiny sounds matter to the movie, like footsteps, object movement, game pieces, breathing, props. They all became more important than usual. So, like, some small sounds were captured practically and then amplified in post-production. So the production itself had to behave like it was making a movie about sound. So it's like a rare case where the filmmaking process mirrors the premise of the movie. And any of the behind-the-scenes B-roll stuff I watched really seemed like it was such a quiet set. And again, I think it's that same effect where somebody's whispering, you just naturally whisper as well. I'm sure there are a couple of jackasses on the set like me or something. Or like, you know, between takes, be like, what's for lunch today? Or something, you know. That's what I would do. And that's why I don't get to work in movies.
Yeah, that's why.
And just a couple of production anecdotes. Krasinski initially passed or hesitated. He didn't instantly jump on board because he didn't think it was like an obvious career move. And I don't think he wanted to make like a monster movie. But then when he dug into the parenthood angle, that's what made it click for him. And then like you mentioned, the real marriage dynamic helped with the intimacy, shorthand, grief, the parenting realism, and fear for children between Krasinski and Blunt, you know, really elevated that aspect of the film. So it wasn't just a casting gimmick. And I don't think Emily Blunt was necessarily even really on board, like you said, at the jump. So it's not like Krasinski was like, I'm going to be in this movie. I want my wife to be in it. That came later and was definitely a very positive addition.
Yep.
But that's it for production. Should we check the vibes?
Let's do it.
Vibe check.
Here we go, we're checking the vibes. Sounding good and looking real nice. How'd they make that guy unalive? It's better off without CGI. Pacing on point and we're feeling fine. The slow burn is taking its time. Here we go, we're checking the vibes.
All right.
Okie dokie.
You stole that from me from past weeks. Or maybe I
don't know who stole it from who. I'm pretty sure you can't copyright okie dokie.
patent pending. Patent pending in the rural. So cinematography. As you noted, we have, you noticed, and then you noted.
Yes, both.
We have a female cinematographer in this film, Charlotte Bruce Christensen. She's a Danish cinematographer known for The Hunt in 2012, not The Hunt that we saw. That was a 2020 movie. She was cinematographer on Far From the Madding Crowd, The Girl on the Train, which was another Emily Blunt movie, Fences, and Molly's Game in 2017. And I'm sure she's probably done some other things since then, but I didn't note them down. Her work often emphasizes naturalistic light, emotional realism, character-centered framing, and human faces and reactions.
That all sounds perfect for this movie.
Yeah, so specifically for A Quiet Place, because dialogue is minimal, the cinematography has to carry more narrative weight than usual. So the visual storytelling depends on not just the faces, which are a very important part, but also the hands with the ASL, eye contact, the distance between family members, so the blocking, environmental details, and of course, light cues. In terms of the camera framing and movement, the camera often stays close to the family. This keeps the threat intimate rather than epic. And while wide shots are used to show their isolation, open vulnerability, exposure in the landscape, and how small the family is in the world, close shots are used for intimacy, communication, fear, and suppressed emotion. And in our Smile episode, I talked a little bit about the color, which, also plays a big role in this movie, especially in the early family spaces. In the movie, you have the warm, earthy yellow and brown tones with the natural light.
I was going to say, it feels very warm. This movie feels cozy.
Yep. Yeah, and really the danger spaces are darker, colder, and then later on you get also the red emergency horror lighting that we talked about earlier. And really it opens into danger space, which I'll get to in Murder Mayhem, and the pharmacy, which is sort of dark and cold. But as soon as they're done there, they walk out into the warm sunshine that is so beautiful and feels like a perfect day out, minus the fact that you're surrounded by the imminent threat of death. Through the visual storytelling, without dialogue, the film has to communicate the rules of the movie, the relationships between the characters, the grief and conflict that they're suffering, their strategy, and the danger that they constantly face without the spoken explanation. So it was really a heavy lifting job. You mentioned all the prep that went into it, and that makes a lot of sense for a movie like this because you want to know you can't just add a line to the script to be like, oh, that doesn't make sense. So can we have the character sort of lay this out? They really came into this swinging in terms of visually representing the storytelling.
Yeah, I had a note about the shot where they show the signal fires in the distance. That one thing tells us there are other people who are alive. This is how they communicate with them. They can't contact these people because they're so far away, but just that one shot of all those little signal fires being lit, there's a bunch of other families going through this or individuals going through this at the same time. And in some of the later films in the series, we learn more about that. But in this movie, that's all it is. It's just that one shot of the signal fire. And that tells us so much about what they've been through, what they're going through, the kind of world that they're in, and that they're not completely alone. But that they also, and yet they are incredibly isolated, as are all of these other people.
But it is sort of like a little sign of hope.
Yes.
Because other than that, you're just thinking about survival. But the world is not completely gone. And it also seems like in his basement, he's trying to, create a radio system to be able to communicate maybe as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's and you see that again, as we've said, the visual storytelling in this movie is so thorough and complete, and it makes it feel like a longer movie than it is because you've learned so much. And I think this is why this movie is really, at least for me, elevated to the level where it is, where it's a 4 for me or a high 2.
And you don't mean longer in a bad way.
No, I mean richer. Like it doesn't. I was so surprised that this was only 91 minutes. And that I had only seen it once in the last 8 years because I remembered so much of it. But what I remembered was the world, not the actual movie itself. We will talk about that when we get into the story part in a little bit, when we get into story time. But I think that the visual storytelling here does so much of the heavy lifting, which means the vibes are a huge piece of the story. I think more so than in most movies that we talk about. Yeah,
and I didn't mean to jump into cinematography so quickly because I'd like to ask you what your overall sort of feeling is on the vibes of this movie. But you did describe, as I was saying it, very cozy in a lot of ways, both in the outdoor scenes with the sunlight, just the way it's filmed is very rich and it looks gorgeous on the screen.
Yeah, it really, really brings a lot to it. And what's crazy is that the cinematography is only part of what makes this movie so amazing. Can I move into visual effects?
Yes.
Special effects. Special effects, which is mostly VFX in this case. One of the reasons, again, I was so surprised by the smallish budget is that the all-creature VFX were done by Industrial Light and Magic, which is, of course, the top visual effects firm in Hollywood. They've done over 500 films and TV shows. They've won 15 Academy Awards. Just the series they've worked on, Star Wars, Indiana Jones, Jurassic Park, the MCU, Harry Potter, Pirates of the Caribbean. They are the premier visual effects company in Hollywood. And so all the creature effects were done by ILM. Visual effects supervisor Scott Farrar, I don't know how he says it. And the creature design was by Tom Wholey and team. Scott Farrar also worked on AI, Artificial Intelligence, Minority Report in 2002, Transformers in 2007. IMDb says he has 10 Oscar wins, but then only lists one win from Cocoon in 1986. So I don't know what else he won for if I just didn't click down the link enough. There's a great interview with Tom Wholey, who was responsible for the creature design. He graduated from Gordon College in 2011, which is a small Christian college here in New England. And I actually have quite a few family members who have studied there at various times over the last few decades. So there's an article in their alumni magazine where he goes deeply into some of what went into the creature design for the monsters. He's done some work on video games. He works for Halo Studios now, so he's done a ton of work, but really, really interesting little team there that I dove into. So one interesting thing that I was surprised about, the original creature design was actually very different while they were filming during production, and it was scrapped in post-production. So the original creature design had a rigid exoskeleton, large rhinoceros-like horns. It had a more humanoid, upright stance. Farrar, the visual effects supervisor, said it looked a bit humanoid, a little bit like a man in a suit, and his head was kind of like a rhinoceros. Early designs were inspired by prehistoric fish fossils and nautilus shells. If you want to read more about this, check the show notes. Krasinski saw the original design in context during post-production and immediately said it wasn't going to work as well as a different design. So the full redesign was completed in 12 weeks ahead of the South by Southwest premiere. So they scrapped the whole creature idea and then did it all in 12 weeks, which is crazy because these monsters look so good.
They don't occupy a lot of screen time, though, so I think that may be what helps with some of the budget.
They don't. And one of my notes from earlier, I think it was in production, the film, and I think this is maybe more appropriate here, but the film drew narrative inspiration from Alien, and also that Jaws informed the approach to restraint with the creature reveals. So waiting to show them all until then. And I still remember the first moment we saw the creature the first time we watched this movie. I remember that moment. I was like, what is that? 8 years later, these effects hold up, I thought. I don't know how you felt about it, but really pretty incredible.
Oh, yeah. No, I didn't have any problem with the CG use in this film. I was also wondering while you were talking, and I had something on that Jaws stuff, and I don't know where I might have just skipped over it. I think it was in some of my Krasinski stuff on sort of their inspirations. I think him and Emily Blunt had discussed sort of the Jaws influence and how they wanted to incorporate that. But I'm wondering if some of the shots were reused, like of the ear of the creature, because we see that a couple of times in the movie. They could have like reused the shot. Maybe.
I think the whole ear was redesigned. There's a really in-depth interview with Tom Holy.
But I mean, when they show it, we see it twice.
Right. I don't know.
I'm just suggesting that would be one way to save on a budget.
Oh, yeah. Possibly. The design breakdown for the final creature design that we do see, it has nothing from a rhinoceros or a rigid exoskeleton. The design breakdown drew from bats, the movement, and the long forearms and the short upper arms. Bog bodies, so mummified human corpses that have been preserved in peat. These bodies have dark, leathery skin, so the texture and color of the skin was based on mummified corpses. And prehistoric fish, so the faceplate movement is like a school of fish moving, which you see when the creatures are trying to listen, right? And their whole face kind of moves. Like they drew inspiration for that from schools of fish. And then the mouth was inspired by carnivorous plants. So the creature design on this is just wild. Yeah, the skin tone texture, talked about that. Let's see. The inner ear was designed to look medical and raw. It was intentionally disgusting. They wanted it to look stringy like dog saliva. This is gross. Farrar said, I want slime and little pieces of fat to squish around. The squishier, the better. Like, all right.
That's what you say about me.
It's true.
You're including that if we ever renew our vows.
100%.
The squishier, the better.
The ear placement was simplified to head only. Originally, it was all over the body, flap design, but it was simplified to be on the head only to make the creature's anatomy immediately readable and understandable to audiences. And it's funny because, again, I remember seeing this creature for the very first time 8 years ago when we watched this and being like, oh my gosh, that's the ear. Like the whole head is like a giant ear. And then the arm membrane was sculpted to look like a crab's inner elbow, which gives them that dynamic movement. So, when the creature is climbing the cars or running through the woods, it kind of moves the way that a crab does. It kind of scuttles like really fast, which is just, it makes you feel weird. And yeah, Jaws and Alien philosophy, hold the creatures back as long as possible. And that was partially an artistic choice, but also practical, because it takes roughly 30 weeks to fully render a creature in post. This was on a Screen Rant article, and the last-minute redesign left them limited time to do that. So you're right on about that. Krasinski himself wore the motion capture suit for several of the creature shots, so that's pretty cool. And again, the creatures are never officially named in the films, but the fan community calls them Death Angels, from one of the newspaper headlines visible. The internal nickname for the creature at Industrial Light and Magic was Happy, which I thought was also kind of funny. There's a really cool creature guide also in the show notes that talks a lot about, there's a deep fandom for this movie and these films, and you can find out a lot more about that online. But yeah, that's what I've got for special effects.
So cool. So cool. I had a question. I forgot it. I'll move on to sound, music, sound design.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there was music in this film.
There was.
Which if you asked me before we watch it, I might have mistakenly said that there was like none. But
Really?
I just forget about it. But not that it's forgettable, but it's used.
So effectively.
Yeah, exactly. And the composer for this movie, we've already talked about before in our Scream episode.
Sure have.
Marco Beltrami, who is a major composer with a strong horror thriller resume way before A Quiet Place. Like I said, he was the composer for Scream. He also did that work for Mimic, The Faculty, The Hurt Locker, World War Z, Logan, the Fear Street movies. It really goes on. And I feel like he came up in something else we watched recently too. But anyway, he knows what he's doing. He's out there. But why have music in a quote-unquote silent movie? Well, partly because Krasinski did not want the film to feel like a pure silence experiment. A score gives the audience emotional continuity, tension shaping, release, and of course, traditional cinematic rhythm, which I think was really part of one of the most important functions of the score in this film was really to keep it feeling like a movie.
Yeah.
However, silence is often more powerful than score in this film, obviously, for many reasons, and I guess some music was eventually cut because the quiet itself worked better in certain sequences. So overall, the score supports emotion and the sound design controls survival tension. So for sound design, we had supervising sound editors and sound designers Eric Adal and Ethan Vanderin of E Squared Sound, and they are central to the movie's success. They've worked together on films before, and I'm going to send Rachel an article for the show notes on them specifically, an interview with them. But they worked on Pacific Rim Uprising, Transformers, The Last Night. That's a whole title, Transformers, The Last Night. I'm not familiar with the Transformers movies, but Trolls, Goosebumps, Godzilla, and many, many more. So they worked together on many other films, and their job was not just to make monsters sound scary in this case. Their job was to design an entire world where silence has pressure, tiny sounds have consequences, and hearing and not hearing become the story mechanics. And in their interview, they talk about how you might assume that a movie based around silence would be easier than some of these other movies like the Pacific Rim sequel, but in fact, it's a lot more difficult in many aspects. Now, the core sound concept is silence is not absence. In this movie, silence becomes the suspense and the world building and the danger and character's perspective. And the premise makes sound literal. Make noise, attract death. You hear that, Ted?
The way he's lying down in his studio chair right now. Ted has his own Papa San chair in the studio, and he is living his best life right now, passed out in the chair.
He was snoring earlier.
He was.
Talk about sound. We can't even let him sleep in this world. Sleeping would kill us. And so basically the movie weaponizes ordinary sound. And like I mentioned earlier, they tried to get a lot of the practical sounds as they were going along. And obviously other things were added in post-production, but they really wanted to make the little sounds amplified. So that's really what you're hearing. Everything from a toy like the rocket, footsteps, rustling of both clothing and outdoor sounds, but also I'm sure you noticed that there were like spots painted on the floor in the house where they could step, because as you know, any old farmhouse, especially in the Northeast, has all its squeaky spots in the floors. Our house has plenty of them. And, you know, as an adult, I've learned where some of those squeaky spots are. I try to avoid them late at night when everybody else is sleeping. The kids have no sense of that. They just go around squeaking everywhere. So we would have to paint spots for the non-squeaky spots on the floor.
The children would love that.
I bet. They'd probably step on them before they're dry, and then we would have like paint on all the squeaky spots too.
Yes, exactly.
But all of this means that tiny actions feel enormous. It makes the audience listen differently and changes how the suspense is built. One thing we haven't mentioned yet about Reagan is the deaf perspective.
I was hoping you were going to mention that.
And it's one of the film's cooler, smarter choices. Whenever the movie shifts into Reagan's perspective, sound drops out completely or becomes heavily muted. And this does multiple things. It puts hearing viewers into unfamiliar sensory space and builds empathy, obviously, for Regan, and also creates dread because the audience knows danger may be present, even when Regan can't hear it. So this sound design choice is actually a character-specific sound design choice as opposed to an atmospheric one, which you don't really see that in a lot of movies or in many movies at all. I'm sure if I thought of something, maybe you could come up with it, but in this instance, the movie uses sound design to shift the point of view. Even within a scene, if you're just thinking about that opening, I guess the second sequence when they're crossing over the bridge after they've left the pharmacy, you sort of see each person, and when it shows as they're crossing the bridge, and as it shows Regan, the sound drops out. And then you see the dread on the parent's face when things start going wrong, and she has to react to the parents reacting because she can't actually hear the danger.
Exactly.
In terms of the creature vocalizations and sound textures, the creature sounds are layered and designed to feel animalistic while mechanical. There's also sort of the clicking echolocation-like sound, and then like wet and organic, squishy, like you said, and also predatory. And I think the word predatory is great because it also sometimes sounds a little bit like the Predator at times. It doesn't the Predator clickety click click?
Yeah.
Just for a quick example on how some of these sound, for some sounds, they like zapped grapes with a stun gun to create the clicking sounds, and then recorded snapping celery for the creature's moving ears, among many other Foley type things. So it wasn't all just digitally created. They layered sounds upon sounds in order to create sort of this complex creature's noises. So just overall, really, the difference in this movie from other movies is that the score was really more of a supporting role compared to the sound design, which usually I feel like it's the other way around. Maybe I have a simplistic view of movie making, and I'm sure there's a lot of sound designers out there who would kick me if they saw kick me in the shins for saying it. I know it's always a huge important part, especially in horror movies. Right? Sound design is often a key factor in the success and effectiveness of the scares in a horror movie. But in this premise, it really took the lead role over the score, which was there to really support the emotional arc and give the movie its cinematic shape. That's all I had on score and sound design.
That sounds great. I guess we should dig into story time.
All right. Let's take it away to story time. Okay, Miss Rachel, would you please tell us about the characters?
Lee Abbott, played by John Krasinski, as we've already spoken, or the father. He's an engineer, which is awfully lucky, but he has been working to build a functional cochlear implant for Regan from salvaged electronics. The cochlear implant is incredibly important as a symbol of the father-daughter relationship, as the symbol of salvation, and also as a plot device, as the cochlear implant does become itself eventually a weapon against the creatures. And it not only gives Regan her hearing back, but it also saves her family, literally. Lee carries enormous guilt and protectiveness across the board. So his relationship with Regan is one of the central relationships in the film, and it is fractured and unspoken, and it never really gets fixed until their last moment together. She believes that he blames her for Beau's death and doesn't love her. And I think when I watched this 8 years ago as the parent of a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old, I felt this very differently than as the parent of a 14 and 10-year-old, because I think now being the parent of a teenager, I understand far more how personally, like then I only had the memories of being a teenager, and now I have the experience of being the parent of a teenager. And I think that his agony and his trying, like when he tries to give her the cochlear implant and she refuses to take it because she's like, it never works. It never works. And eventually he just puts it in her hand and lets her make that choice, because that's what you as a parent have to do as your child grows and moves away, is you cannot control them and tell them what to do anymore. You have to facilitate and then allow them to make the choices that you know are going to result in their own suffering. So I related a lot more to Lee this time around, I think. The implant can be read in two ways, and I think this is important for themes later, but it could be a father trying to fix his daughter's deafness, but it also can kind of be the ultimate act of love as he tries to show her how much he cares, because he can't tell her how much he cares, because she won't listen, she can't hear him, he can't say it. And the film doesn't come down on one end or the other here on what he's trying to do. It just shows us, and we get to kind of read into that. Man, that last line that he signs, I love you, I've always loved you. This film has lived really vividly in my memory for, I could not believe it was 8 years, but like I felt like I'd seen it 100 times because it is such a purely powerful act of storytelling. And it's so simple, and a lot of watching it with these eyes, with podcast eyes on, right? Watching that moment, it hit me just as hard this time as it did before. But I was a much younger parent at that time. There's one point where when he's talking to Marcus at the waterfall and he says, and Marcus asks him outright, do you blame her? And he says, no, it was no one's fault. He's talking to Marcus there, right? Mm-hmm. When he says that. And I wrote down, yeah, because that's what you're supposed to say. Like, I'm not sure if I believe him in that moment. Because as humans, we do blame people, even when we know that it's not really their fault. Like, does he actually hold some blame? We don't know for sure. Like, yeah, he says he doesn't blame her at all, but are we sure that he doesn't blame her a little bit? Like, that's part of the tragedy when someone dies in a family, especially when there's an accident and everybody blames themselves, but also maybe holds a little bit of blame for each other. It was just a really beautiful moment. And what's more important, Reagan doesn't believe that he doesn't blame her because she blames herself. And teenagers don't listen to their parents because that's the way their brains are made. So even if he tells her, she's not going to believe him. And then the other thing I wrote a note about him was his wound that he had already experienced from the creature, was that fatal before he sacrificed himself? I don't know if you thought about that at all. He's wounded. He has an abdominal wound from the creature like throwing him aside before he realizes that to save his children, he's going to have to sacrifice himself. And I wonder if that wound was fatal already. And also, does it really matter? It doesn't really change the sacrifice either way, right? Like, but I wonder, would he have died anyway? I don't know if that's important. It was just something I noticed.
Well, and he probably wouldn't know either way whether it was fatal or not.
True
necessarily.
Story.
Like I'm sure.
Oh, he had so much adrenaline running through him. He probably didn't even feel it.
Like, I'm sure they would have tried to patch him up if they weren't surrounded by death.
I saw somewhere, and this is a good transition into the next character, to Evelyn Abbott, that she was a doctor. And I'm not sure, do we learn that in the movie because she has the medical equipment? Or I'm not sure. I just saw somebody wrote down that she was a doctor. If she was, maybe she could have helped him. But she's pregnant throughout the film. That's a really interesting thing. How are you going to go and get pregnant? Because it is a year and a half into this thing. So she got pregnant after it happened. It's not like she was pregnant when it happened, right? And so that choice to have a child, if it was a choice and not an accident, this happens in The Walking Dead, right? First season, mild spoilers, sorry, for a 20-year-old show. But it's interesting, the thought of pregnancy in a post-apocalyptic world. And so a lot of what we see of her character development is her creating this soundproof chamber for the baby in advance, right? That they're meticulously planning what to do for this baby and making this little coffin with oxygen for the baby to survive.
It made me think about how weird it would be if babies screamed in utero. Like cried in utero. Well, obviously they don't until they emerge in the world. But if you could hear muffled crying from pregnant women's bellies.
That would be strange.
There's a movie idea. Nobody take that. Patent pending.
There's no air in there. They don't breathe in the womb.
But I'm saying if they did. I understand the mechanics of why they don't.
Okay.
But just how weird it would be.
Hello?
They learn how to speak?
No. Careful not to say that word around the dog. Once again, we're all dead. The giving birth alone in the farmhouse bathtub is one of the most discussed scenes about this movie, and also just absolutely insane as someone who has labored and given birth twice. Thinking of doing that without making noise, wild, right? Contractions in silence. Yelling in pain is one of the most basic human responses, and the pain of childbirth and labor is unlike any other pain that I've ever experienced. I know that I, at least in my second labor, was like vocalizing intensely. I know a lot of other moms who vocalize really loudly because it's like the only way to get through the pain of the contractions. And so the fact that Evelyn doesn't make that noise, just crazy. Really nuts.
But it's done in a realistic way.
It is done in a realistic way, although it is a very fast birth, although it's her fourth baby, and the more babies you have, the faster the birthing is usually, generally. There's always exceptions. Childbirth is a very dangerous proposition, even if you're not alone in a bathtub with a carnivorous monster. So she did great, delivered her own baby. The shot of her bleeding in the bathtub with the creature right there, like that shot was really beautiful. I wrote that down. Very visceral, upsetting. Childbirth can be very traumatic, and so this scene could be very difficult if you have had a traumatic childbirth or gone through one. As a mother, I really like Evelyn's way of giving her children the skills and abilities that they need to live in the world that exists. So at one point, they are, and it's both of them, it's them together. Like they're a really strong parental unit. Like they both kind of work, even like she doesn't criticize him for the way that he's parenting and vice versa. But at one point, I think, does she say she's smart? She'll have found a place. Like she comforts him because Reagan had run away to get away, right? The degree of trust that the parents have had to put into their children just to function, very close to what children used to have couple hundred years ago when they were getting married off at 14, right? You were an adult by the time you were 12 or 13. Not entirely, but you were expected to kind of know how to survive and take care of yourself and your siblings. Just read Little House on the Prairie for that. That kind of survival parenting, I think they portrayed that really, really well. All right, so Reagan Abbott, who is deaf, we've talked a lot about that already. She blames herself for Beau's death. She believes her father blames her, and this relationship between the two of them really drives what becomes the central emotional arc that kind of comes to completion when he sacrifices himself. When she gives, we learned so much about this girl through all of her actions, but she gives her brother the rocket. She doesn't see him grab the batteries on the way out. She just wants to make her little brother happy. And she, very much like a teenager, does something without thinking of all the possible consequences, right? And that is very good writing and also just really tragic, because in a world that is not deadly, those kinds of mistakes are okay. They make mistakes all the time. That's what being a teenager is making mistakes. But in this world, making mistakes has deadly consequences and shapes the entire narrative that comes after. Her deafness does make her more vulnerable, but it is also an advantage that saves everyone in her family. And then, of course, her cochlear implant becomes the thing that then defeats the creatures. And she figures that out. She figures that out even as we are figuring that out along with her as viewers. And then she figures it out and then delivers that kill shot at the end to save her mother and her two brothers. Although, is the baby a boy or a girl? I don't remember.
It's a boy, they said.
It's a boy, that's right. And Simmons has said, I want kids out there to see themselves represented on screen. They can be the ones to save people. They don't have to be saved. I think this is a really great film to show teenagers. Marcus, the second born, he's the most openly fearful member of the family, and his arc is about overcoming that fear and about how his father is trying to teach him how to survive in this world where their parents know that they very likely are going to have to survive without them, and so are trying to give them those tools, but also give them love and togetherness. You know, we see the family all eating together, playing board games together. It would be very easy to abandon those kinds of rituals, but those are the kinds of things that bring hope just like having a baby in the face of utter destruction seems like crazy. Like, why would you do that? Because it is the ultimate act of hope and of love. His scene where he kind of transitions is when he goes and lights the fireworks to save his mother. And he buys the family time. And so by doing, and his dad trusts him enough to do that, right? Like, again, the way these parents choose to parent their children, which includes putting them in harm's way because they live in a world where harm is everywhere. I think that is a hard lesson. That was 10 years ago. That was a hard lesson as a parent. These days, post-COVID, in a world that seems like it's gone mad, I think it's even harder to let your children do things that put them in danger even a little bit, which then has real consequences for their ability to handle danger when it does show up, if they don't have chances to practice. Luckily, we don't have face-eating aliens around yet. So letting your kid go to the corner store might be hard for you, but it might be an important part of them growing into a fully functional adult who can fight off face-eating aliens when they show up. And then we've got our fifth character, Bo Abbott, who is only there at the very beginning. He gets the toy space shuttle by Reagan, and then he grabs the batteries like any little kid would do because he wants to make it go, right? So when I was in middle school, we had an author come and speak to us in the school library. I vividly remember us all sitting there listening to this author of children's books. And maybe she wrote some sort of mystery book or horror for middle schoolers kind of thing. This would have been in the early 90s. I was in middle school. And she said, never kill kids or pets. I don't know why she said this to a bunch of 11-year-olds, but she said, one thing I learned as an author was that you can't kill kids or pets. I don't remember why she said this to us, but it does stick in my mind. And so this choice by the writers to kill off a child in the very first scene of the movie tells you a whole lot about what kind of movie you're watching, and must have been unbelievable to that first audience who didn't know what they were in for. Like, it is kind of an unwritten rule. Not anymore. I mean, there's plenty of movies that kill off kids and pets these days, but to have it happen in a movie that feels so cozy, and even in the post-apocalyptic genre, having children die, I mean, there's plenty of movies that do it, but it was just such a shocking occurrence the first time you see this movie.
Well, it really sets the stakes. That's one of the complaints I have about some movies, is that they don't raise the stakes. Looking at you, Scream 6, I love some of the characters you kept alive, but you should have killed them.
Yeah. Because
it takes away the graveness of the situation if you're not willing to sacrifice. And the same thing goes for some of the big TV shows too. You know, some of the best shows kill off some of the bigger characters because that really lets the audience know that there are big stakes aboard, big stakes afoot.
I completely agree. And I think that that's part of what, again, just this 91-minute movie, super tight, so simple, but making that choice narratively sets up the conflict that resolves at the end of the movie. It sets us up for the whole thing. Everything is changed by the loss of this child. And it's, 31 days is the first scene. And then the next scene, I have it in my notes, which I don't have up in front of me. There's 3 days. We see day 31. We see day 238, maybe?
472.
472, and then day 473. And so we see kind of, very early on where they clearly have already learned how to survive when most people haven't. And they lose the child 3 months in. And then a year and a half into this crisis, every day is the same, right? We see like an ordinary day for them. And then we have the day where we have the inciting incident of the childbirth, which really is the inciting incident, I think. And I don't know if you're going to talk about that in Murder Mayhem, but like how far into the movie we are when we see that. It just feels like so much more happens, but it's because they have created in the relationships, in the habits of the characters, in the connections between them and what we see, their interactions. All of this, we know this family deeply in far less screen time than we get in a lot of like 2.5 hour long movies, which is a testament to how well written and filmed and acted and produced this movie is.
And not to be nitpicky, it's really when the water breaks is the inciting incident, but like her going into labor, not just the childbirth.
Right. I was thinking of childbirth as a whole process. Oh. Yeah, like because it starts with well, I won't get nitpicky about that part. It was a really fast childbirth because usually they're pretty long.
Well, and it just depends too, but she seems to have put herself in the bathtub when she realized this is coming now.
Yeah, very quickly. Very quickly.
But I think fear too is like labor-inducing type thing, right? You can eat spicy foods. Mm-hmm. I think laughing.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Fear. Mm-hmm. I wonder if that's a job that exists.
Oh, God.
Like your job is to help somebody induce labor.
By scaring them?
Or whatever.
Or just doing anything?
I mean, if you're not funny, you're going to have to go with scaring them, yes. But yeah. Is that all the characters?
That's all I got for characters, yeah.
Just a quick show note for the listeners and if I'm wrong about this, I'm just going to cut this part. So here's a look behind the podcast magic. But before Rachel started talking about Regan, we got interrupted by one of our children yelling from the bathroom because there was no more toilet paper left. And the other child would only provide tissues.
Yes.
So we had to cut, and I'm not sure if you were in the middle of a point that you were making. And then, so if there was like an abruptness, but right before Regan, that's what happened. But maybe I'm wrong.
And that's actually a really great way to show how parenting really is and
how incapable we've raised our children to be.
But I think that is us as a society and not us as individual parents. I think we've done a pretty good job. But yeah, this is parenting children about the same age as the children in the movie.
So, does that mean it's time for Murder Mayhem?
It does mean it's time for Murder Mayhem.
Murder Mayhem, not a lot of murder in this movie, but certainly plenty of mayhem. It is a world of mayhem, if you haven't caught that by now, in which sound attracts monsters and silence equals survival. And of course, really, we get a great sense of the mayhem in our opening scene and sequence as the family's first scavenging in an abandoned sort of drugstore, convenience store, place where there's a pharmacy.
Grocery store.
But it really does seem like you said it's like a Walgreens, but like a family kind of small business. Mm-hmm. Because it looks like Marcus is sick in that, right?
Yeah, he has some sort of infection or he has a fever, very weak.
So Evelyn's looking for medicine. Everybody's sort of around doing their own things. Bo, the littlest, is drawing on the floor, draws a fantastic drawing of a rocket for his age. And he wants to bring the toy rocket. His dad tells him he can't because obviously the sound would attract the creatures. The dad very clearly takes out the batteries of it. And I thought he was going to take out the batteries and give him the rocket the first time I saw it. But in fact, he takes out the batteries, which signals to the kid that, the power, the electricity of it is the bad part, the danger, and sets everything aside, says it's too loud, you can't have it. But then, like you mentioned, Regan gives him the rocket, without knowing that Bo is going to grab the batteries. Obviously, as they're walking back to their house, they're crossing the rail bridge or whatever. All of a sudden, as we jump into Regan's perspective in the absolute silence, then it goes back to looking at the dad and we suddenly hear the rocket noise and they all react.
I just realized, we know very clearly that Regan blames herself for her brother's death. We know that the dad, that Lee, blames himself. He put the batteries on the counter. He could have put those in his pocket, right? And then later on, Evelyn says, I should have been carrying him if I had been carrying him. So she blames herself. And then Marcus, if he hadn't been sick, they wouldn't have all been there trying to find medicine for him. Every member in that family has a way to blame themselves for the death of the youngest member, which I had not put all together until this moment. But yeah, really masterful storytelling.
So really this opening sequence of the pharmacy plus the Bo's death establishes the rules of the world, the stakes, like I mentioned, really the cruelty that exists in this world and the cause of the family's central grief moving forward. and also creates the guilt, like you're saying, Reagan's distance from her father, and the emotional fracture in the family. Really, the next major sequence, then the inciting event, as you said, Evelyn goes into labor, and she's heading toward the basement, which went back and forth on what I think she was going to turn on the lights anyway, the emergency lights.
Yes.
To let because everybody else is out of the house. She doesn't know necessarily that Reagan's run away.
Right.
But the father and Marcus had gone to the waterfall.
Yes.
Oh, and I guess there's that sequence beforehand. The scary sequence in the woods. I didn't put it here in my Murder Mayhem list, but when Lee and Marcus are returning from the waterfall, they encounter an old man who has a dead woman at his feet, presumably his spouse.
Yeah.
She looks like she's encountered violence of some kind. We don't know if I guess it's probably from a creature, right?
Probably.
I guess you could think that maybe it's implied he did something, but I think it really is more the creature, and now he has nothing left.
Yeah.
And Lee is looking at him already knowing that maybe this man is suffering some grief and is, signals to him not to make any noise. But you can tell the man's about to yell. So the second that happens, Lee grabs Marcus up. They run off, hide behind a tree, and, they're trying to cover Marcus's eyes and ears so he can't see or hear what's happening to the old man in the woods.
Right, which is I never even thought that the old man could have done anything to his wife, just more that now he's all alone and now he has nothing left to live for, so he's going to die by suicide the best and easiest way there is to do in this world, by calling the monsters to him. So yeah, that is definitely a murder mayhem situation. I do think that she was turning the lights on because she went into labor. Right.
And there was several moments in the film where they were cutting back and forth between intense sequences, which I always like it when that's successfully pulled off, where you can kind of feel everybody's situation all at once, especially as the intensity grows. So she's heading toward the basement to turn on the emergency red lights, the red emergency lights. And as she's heading down the stairs, she steps on the exposed nail that got pulled up earlier in the movie.
Chekhov's nail?
Chekhov's nail. And I feel like they were a little obvious with the nail.
They were a little obvious with the nail.
I feel like they didn't need to show us when the nail got pulled up. They didn't need to linger on the nail.
Right.
But they did. It's not the biggest deal in the world. And maybe some audience members needed that. Very reminiscent of Marv in Home Alone.
I was just imagining that scene.
But as she steps on that, she was carrying a picture frame with a glass in it. That drops and shatters. And she instantly, has to go into, at the moment she's feeling this completely unexpected pain, on top of the pain she's already feeling from being in labor, her survival brain clicks in. She suppresses her scream the best she can. And this scene works so well because pain normally creates noise. She can't scream, and childbirth is already imminent. And the threat is physical and sonic. And so when she's down there, she's turned the lights on. We see that there then is a creature that has entered the house.
Yep. Super scary.
So as Lee and Marcus return, they see the emergency lights, and basically you can tell that they already sort of have a plan in place for this because Lee instructs Marcus to go off, do what he's supposed to do, light the rocket, basically, which are fireworks.
So smart.
And it's those fireworks, right, that allow her to get upstairs?
Yes. Well, and she also sets the timer that she turns the egg timer on because that constant noise will disorient the creature. And she puts it on the other side of the room. So when the egg timer goes off, that's when she goes upstairs.
Right, because the creature came down in the basement, which I failed to mention.
The creature comes down in the basement. The creature attacks the egg timer, and she goes back upstairs, avoiding the nail this time, and goes into the bathroom where she goes into the big clawfoot tub.
Yeah, that would have been insult to injury if she'd stepped on the nail again. I feel like that's what you would have done.
Probably. But she gets upstairs and then now she's in active labor in the bathtub, bleeding. And out comes the baby, and she makes no noise.
Right. Well, and it's timed perfectly. As soon as the fireworks start going out, she goes to scream as she's giving birth.
Yes. And so the fireworks go off at exactly the right time. And the creature, of course, goes out. And we've already seen, because Lee has shown Marcus, if there's a louder sound, they can't hear the sound underneath. So you can hide your sound by using a louder sound. And then they use that mechanism for the rest of the film for the characters to survive. So, yes. And then the creatures run out and she has had the baby. And ta-da.
And along the way, Marcus survives a close encounter with a creature, gets knocked out as he's running away, basically, right? Or knocked down, at least. He's running through the cornfield away from one of the creatures. And it's his flashlight that's lying there on the ground that attracts Reagan's attention as she returns to the farmstead and sees her brother there. They end up going to the top of the corn silo because that's where they're supposed to meet their dad.
Yep.
And, you know, a lot of great stuff there between the brother and sister about, you know, Marcus insisting dad will come. And finally she's like, he'll come for you. Like, he won't come for me.
Which is like so angsty and teenagery. Like this is what teenagers do, but it's so tragic because we are seeing how much they love their children and how much they've done to protect their children. And yet, which is kind of what it's like being the parent of a teenager when you do so much and it's just, that's not what they see because that's not what their brains are programmed to see. Their brains are programmed to see all the ways that we suck because that's how the brain works. Except in this case, it's just so tragic because of what has happened and what's going to happen.
Well, and she will see later on in the basement, like how much work he was doing.
Yeah.
So they're at the top of the silo, but then during their argument back and forth about whether dad's going to come, Marcus falls into the grain silo, the corn silo, triple corn. I gave you the triple corn treatment.
Great.
And one of the doors falls in. Is that what it was? Or did she throw that down? I couldn't tell.
No, one of them falls, like he breaks through the top.
And it was really that door that saved them. It was really Titanic
right.
on corn.
It was like a panel, I think. Yeah, on top. But I don't know. I'm no silo expert.
And there was room for both of them on that door in this movie.
Sure was.
But Reagan follows down. She jumps down. She wants to save her brother. But the corn really is behaving like quicksand. Mm-hmm. And the environment itself becomes deadly. So they must survive without attracting creatures, which they fail to do. One of the creatures, hears the sound of them down there, comes down, and they hide beneath the door. This is after he's already saved his sister once. She falls beneath the corn, and he's able to pull her out. And the reason the scene works so well is not only the monster danger that we've been already programmed to be looking out for throughout this film, it's the environmental danger. And the kids have to survive without creating the sound. The silo scene is basically a monster scene where the environment tries to kill them first.
Yes.
And then they get reunited with their father after surviving the silo scene. And he's, they big group hug, but then Lee realizes there's still a creature nearby and basically has them go off to the truck. Mm-hmm. Basically says, get in the truck, you'll be safe in there. But they're not. Well, and Lee gets injured by the creature. What noise do they make that draws the attention to the truck?
I can't remember.
There's something. Either way, and we don't realize, we get put in the perspective of Reagan. This was like one of the greatest uses of that. They've sort of built up the use of this technique in the film to really pull it off here. You're hearing the silence, and then you can see over her shoulder that a monster's just running full speed at the truck, and all of a sudden the kids are in mortal danger. The creature's just attacking the truck, and Reagan looks out at her father. That's where you get the "I love you, I've always loved you" sign from him, and he screams to draw the creature away.
And Evelyn is watching all of this on the closed circuit TV. Right. So the family she is witnessing her children almost dying and her husband sacrificing himself to save them while she has a baby behind her in the little coffin thing. Or no, she's holding the baby at that point.
Right.
Right? So she's holding her newborn baby, watching her other two children, having already lost a child, and watching her husband sacrifice himself. And then Marcus, thinking very quickly, hits the parking brake on the truck. So while the creature is distracted by the father, they woo down all the way.
They coast down, yep. And so really that's the emotional climax of the scene, you know, tying together all of the themes that you're going to get into about parenthood, sacrifice, communication, and forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have the hearing aid feedback discovery. So the kids get reunited with their mother down in the basement. Even though Lee has sacrificed himself, we still have creatures afoot.
Oh, yeah.
You know, one comes into the basement and Reagan realizes that the feedback that's being created between her cochlear implant and hearing aid and the creature's ears disorients the creatures really bad, like hurts them.
Yeah, and it exposes kind of that soft, fleshy part, and the rest of the creatures is all this exoskeleton kind of hard part, right? But it makes them vulnerable.
Like makes them seize.
That is one of this is the visual exposition of what is their weakness on Lee's board, right? And so she looks, it's a little obvious, but it needs to be, because that we don't need them to say, I've figured it out, right? Like she can look at that, what is their weakness on the board, looks at the cochlear implant in her hand, looks at the creature writhing in pain, makes the connection, and then amplifies the signal.
And so that turns what has always been treated as a vulnerability for Reagan into the key to the family's survival. Then, of course, you sort of have the final shotgun moment where Evelyn prepares the shotgun while all this is going on. And Reagan figures out the feedback weakness. So she amplifies it using the radio that's there. And then Evelyn, I'm trying my hardest to get the characters' names because we don't know them.
Right.
Shoots it in the head, knowing that that's the only way they can survive in the moment, but that could cause a near future problem given the loud sound of the shotgun.
Yep.
And the movie basically ends on them watching the monitors as not a million, but many more than the 3 that he has, because right on his board it says like known creatures in the vicinity 3 or something like that.
Right. They had 3 in the area, and he killed one of them, or he just injured one of them. You take one of them out. Either way, there's a bunch more coming.
And it sort of ends with Reagan preparing her feedback device and Evelyn cocking her shotgun.
Love it.
The one moment that I missed here in the lineup was shortly after the baby was born, and they're down in the I call it the baby bunker that they had prepared, where the box was to keep the baby silent and all of that. And when he went out to find the kids, there was a water leak into the basement, and Evelyn wakes up.
That's right.
And there's a creature in the basement who goes under the water. That was terrifying.
I wrote, they can swim.
And she hides behind the water falling into the basement that's mirroring the waterfall scene, which I thought was a great use of that.
Yeah, like they use that idea that Lee shows Marcus earlier at the waterfall at various places. That's one of them, where you can hide a smaller sound underneath a bigger sound.
How did she get out of that situation?
I am trying to remember. The creature was distracted by another noise, obviously. Yeah. Maybe by him yelling.
Maybe.
Did it run out to...
No, because by that point, she's in the other basement. She gets into the house, back into the house in the basement where she's watching it on the monitor. I don't know, maybe the fireworks or something.
Yeah.
There was something, and I know I confused you by adding that in out of order, so.
Right. No, and again, this is such a short movie, but so much happens.
But that's the Murder Mayhem, and man, what a suspenseful film, and really, like I say, a lot of horror movies don't really scare me, but I mean, this one definitely has some good scares in it.
It does. Might have something to do with the themes.
Oh, I was going to do some of the nitpicks.
Oh, in the Murder Mayhem section? Sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry, that was a great transition that we don't get to use.
I know, right?
So sorry. Real quickly, why didn't they live near the waterfall was one thing that I guess viewers, that obviously, don't be an idiot. They can't live near the waterfall. They don't have a farm near the waterfall.
There's no shelter. There's no cornfields. I wanted to know who planted the corn. Was that corn from a previous season? Because planting corn would probably be pretty loud, and they've just got fields of corn there. And who harvested all the corn in the silo? That's just my question.
Good question.
Thanks.
Maybe that is from a long time ago. Maybe it's from a year and a half before.
Maybe
2 years before, when the world shut down.
I mean, the corn and the goldenrod tell me it's August, September in the movie. Supposed to be. So like, or September, October even. Sometime in like late summer, early fall. And so if it was a year and a half after things happened, if it had been planted the year before and never harvested, maybe it came back. Or maybe he's a farmer. No, he's an engineer.
But
I don't know.
they had a farm, so maybe they were doing some small level farming.
Right. And maybe they did farm that. Like maybe they did plant all that corn by hand quietly.
I mean, they got time.
They do.
Another was why have a baby, which you talked about earlier. It's a common debate. The villain but I don't have a huge problem with it. I mean, I think it's not a great idea if it was intentional, but I can understand potentially in their grief if they had always, talked about having 3 kids. A lot of people have specific numbers of children that they always plan to have. And if you lose a child, maybe you have another child. If it was intentional or it was an accident and there was no great way to resolve it before they found out.
Yeah. Or they were morally opposed to having an abortion. Because I'm sure they could have found pills if they discovered, you know what I mean, at the pharmacy. That's also been a plot in various post-apocalyptic films where people get pregnant and try to get rid of the baby by using like the pills or the morning after pill or whatever it is. But maybe they discovered it and because of the loss of Bo decided that it was, hope in the face of despair, right? But yeah, it's not a very logical choice. But reproduction in general isn't like a super logical choice if you have feelings for your offspring. Like it's suffering.
And then sort of the last one, I'm sure there are many more, but one that kind of I brought up and then talked myself out of with your help. The film, why not use loud sound as a weapon earlier in the film? And the film frames the feedback discovery as specific to Reagan's device and not something the family fully understands until later, which obviously that's not something that they know is going to interact with the monster. But I had said to you, I was like, if you've already like put out all these lights and stuff, why wouldn't you maybe put out like a speaker that you could control from the basement in the case of an emergency to draw monsters away? And like you said, with the egg timer thing, the monster attacked the egg timer and destroyed it, and it would do the same thing with the speaker. So you probably couldn't even test that device
right,
if you wanted to without destroying it.
But once they discover that that there is a certain frequency, then that becomes something that might be replicable if they can survive long enough to use that in the future, right? Which is why a sequel to this movie makes so much sense.
Right.
And why they made one. Like, pretty crazy that if they hadn't made a sequel.
And I'm so glad they did. It was also good.
It was, but we're not going to talk about it.
Nope.
We are going to talk about some of the themes in this movie.
Oh, she's double segue.
Double segue. First of all, parenthood, which as terror, devotion, and guilt, it kind of is the... So I used to work in finance, and there was a guy on my investment team that I worked with who had 2 children. I think since he and his wife have had another since I worked there. It was a long time ago. But he once said to me that having children doubles the standard deviation of your life, which if you don't know math and statistics and things, basically your highs are twice as high and your lows are twice as low. So that being a parent means, as I like to say, some days you get to watch your 2 children lovingly walk down the path together towards the roller coaster they're going to go on together. And sometimes your 3-year-old throws up in your mouth. Like, the highs are higher than anything I knew before parenthood, and the lows are definitely lower than anything else. And I think this movie captures that in all of its glory.
We don't have a 3-year-old I don't know about, do we?
No, we don't. That's just one of my least favorite moments of being a parent of the last 15 years. Krasinski has described the film as being all about parenthood, but I think you could see that even if you didn't hear him talking about it. And the fear of not being able to protect your children, which is a part of every parent's psyche, at least all the parents I know, He has said that Parenthood gave him a way into the genre. And as we say quite often on this podcast, horror asks the questions about what it is to be human, to be in relationship with one another, and to live in a dangerous world, much in the same way that religion and philosophy ask those questions. Horror just asks them in another way. Every constraint that the Abbotts live under can be read as an externalization of parenting anxiety. This comes from a piece in the New Statesman that you can find in the show notes. But everything that they're under, like letting the kids go off by themselves, the kids making choices that are not safe, everything that the kids have to face is existentially dangerous for them. But as parents, we ourselves can say that, like, yeah, there's a lot of things in the world that are dangerous for children. One of my parents just texted me and my siblings an article about the dangers of the internet and was like, don't let your kids on the internet. And it was like, okay, no problem. I'll get right on that. We've also got kind of the specific parental guilt thread that we've talked about extensively, right? But that both of the parents carry the weight of Beau's death. Evelyn carries the guilt about Beau, but also the guilt about not giving her children what they need, about not being able to, the children only have each other. The problem, too, teenagers are supposed to be with other teenagers. And so what would it be like to have a child moving into young adulthood without everything that entails? We know that our kids are obsessed with their social lives right now, as they should be. That's the way they're wired. And luckily, it's 2026, not 2020. So they get to go to school and hang out with their friends and do things and explore that the way their brains were made to explore that. And so everything in this is about parenting, I think. The line, who are we if we can't protect them? This line lands differently for me now in 2026 than it did back in 2018 because my children are a different age. Early on in my parenting journey, when I had a toddler and a newborn, an older parent said to me something her mom had said to her, little kids, little problems, big kids, big problems. I know that's cliche, but it's cliche for a reason. And the older your kids get, the bigger their problems get, and the less you are able to fix those problems for them. And that's a really hard journey. This movie encapsulates that. Yeah. Anything else on parenthood as guilt and terror and devotion?
No, I think I've got it all under control.
Great. Perfect. You can help me out later. Like many horror movies, we've got danger in the mundane, right? We've got batteries, we've got a nail on the stairs, we've got, playing a board game. Everything in this world becomes dangerous. We talked about this in our supermarket horror episode, right? Like one of the reasons that in mall horror is so compelling is because these are places that are ordinary, that we know well, that then become dangerous. Or any home invasion horror, most horror films deal with the ordinary becoming dangerous, and post-apocalyptic genre takes this head on. And I think that's why most post-apocalyptic films or television often have scenes in stores, right? Because the stores are it is the marketplace of modernity. And so finding, what would that be like without all the people? I'm not sure if this is a theme, but I think this is something that kept coming up for me as I went through. But world building itself as storytelling, and I think we've covered most of this, but like even Beau's death is not the inciting incident, it's world building, right? Like that's not the incident that starts it all. The incident that starts it is the invasion, which we don't even learn about until the second and third movies, right?
Right. Well, that's why I think you're saying that the birth was...
Yes. The water breaking, the Evelyn going into labor is actually the inciting incident. Everything up until then is world building. And we've talked a lot about that.
Yeah. And basically when we say inciting incident, usually every movie or really any story has a moment that changes the trajectory of your protagonists.
Yes.
And sets them on the journey, the important journey of the movie.
Yeah, and in this one, it is not the fact that aliens have invaded that are attracted to sound. That's just the background.
Right.
Like the inciting incident that sets off the action is when Evelyn goes into labor and steps on that nail, and then everything goes sideways. And then this movie also talks a lot about communication. Every form of communication is an act of love and a survival mechanism. So ASL, the fact that the family can communicate silently, the string of lights that Evelyn uses to signal, the whiteboard in the basement, when Lee signs "I love you" to his kids, "I have always loved you." Like, in his act of like working on the cochlear implant for his daughter, even though she doesn't know how hard he's working on it, all of that communication and service are the ways that people show each other that they love each other. The cochlear implant will help Reagan survive because it will give her the ability to hear, which is one more way that will help her survive, but it's also his act of love for her. It's an act of service. And this kind of transitions us into the next theme, which is his impulse to fix her hearing affirming or ableist? And people have come down on different sides of this argument. So Reagan's deafness is a vulnerability because she can't hear the creatures if they're nearby, but it's also the survival skill that saves everybody. It's the thing that makes them able to communicate silently, which gives them an edge in terms of survival. Many people in the deaf community praised the film for its use of authentic ASL. You talked about kind of the different accents that the family members had or the different tones that they had, that they used an actress who was deaf, and also a central deaf character who is both capable and heroic. I am not deaf, but I am disabled. I have issues with mobility. And I know for me, when I see a character that has problems with their mobility and that disability is not the center of their character, that really makes me happy, because like the guy with the wheelchair in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, for example, like
he's the worst.
I know, but it's not because he's disabled. Like him being disabled is just a part of his character. And in part, that's why this is a really interesting question about Reagan's deafness. The film is centered around her deafness, and it is seen as a danger because she can't hear. Some scholars have criticized it for framing silence and the inability to speak as inherently tragic. There's an article on HuffPost by Pamela J. Kinchelow who says silence, especially the inability to speak, is depicted as tragic, and that the film's emotional logic is built on the assumption that you need a voice to stay connected. I would argue with that. I don't think that the film's logic says that at all.
It specifically shows you don't need to speak to be able to communicate, and very well.
But it also shows the very real fact that it not being able to hear in a world where there are predators.
Right. That's the tragic.
Puts you at a disadvantage.
Right. She's more vulnerable in the specific world of this movie.
Yeah. No, it's fun. Now that I'm like kind of saying it out loud and thinking about it, I think that perhaps...
I hate some of these academics and what they have to say. That it seems to me sometimes like people are intentionally just looking for negativity in something that's not negative.
Right. But I do think that framing, like, I know that there are people who are deaf who do not see it as a disability and instead just see it as the way that they are, right? Similarly, that neurodivergence is not necessarily a disability, that it's just a different way of being in the world. However, I would argue that in a world in which there are apex predators that eat humans, that not being able to hear or see or move would be a distinct disadvantage. We have talked about how loud our family is and how we wouldn't be able to survive this movie. I can't move very fast. Like, that would be a problem for survivability. Like, I would not survive in a world in which we were prey, right? And so, I don't know. And maybe I think that maybe this is more of an empowering. I'm not deaf though, so I can't speak from that perspective, but I can speak from the perspective of really appreciating representation. And again, I know that Millie has said repeatedly that this film is important for her to show that there are deaf characters who are not just powerless or defined by their deafness. And I think that is true.
And if you were her dad who loved her, and this is because she had a cochlear implant, she did have some level of being able to hear. And I'm not an expert on any of this. I also am not deaf, but I did live one summer with somebody who had a cochlear implant, and somebody who had one pretty early on in the inception of the cochlear implant. So when she had them on, and especially if you were looking at her, you didn't need to use sign language to speak with her. Like, you could carry out full conversations as hearing abled people can. So presumably Millie Reagan in this movie, when her cochlear implant was functional, was able to use that, was able to, hear her environment to a greater degree than she could without it.
Right. And she was so sad when it didn't work. Like, she was so devastated when the one that her dad gave her again didn't function, right? Mm-hmm. But then it turned out to be the instrument of their salvation. So I do think that's worth thinking about and talking about. And I think I really want to watch the other movies again because having watched this one again, I'd like to see how those themes are explored and presented in the next two films. That's all I've got that's worth talking about. Who's your favorite character?
I went with Reagan. Me
too. The angry teen daughter.
There's something to like about all of them, for sure.
It was between her and Evelyn for me, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, they're all so great. There's only really 4 characters we get to know in this movie, right? I mean, there is the old man who I didn't even mention in the character section because he's the only other living human that we see. But yeah, I think Reagan, and again, being the mother of a teen and a tween, she really speaks to me deeply. I think she plays this role so well. Again, I want to watch the next movie because she has a pretty big role in that.
And she probably had the biggest character arc in this film. Yeah. At least the most straightforward character arc. I think it was more subtle with the parents. And for Marcus, I mean, they all had character arcs of their own, but hers is the most drastic.
I think the parents arrived where they were over the course of the year and a half before we joined them. Like, I think, like, the fact that Evelyn is, the parents are like, they're smart, they know what they're doing. Like, we struggle with that with our children, to be like, are they going to be okay? Like, can they go on those roller coasters by themselves, right? Like, we struggle with that, and it's taken me time to get used to watching them kind of go out. I think that Evelyn and Lee actually achieved a lot of that before we meet them on screen, and we see Reagan and Marcus do the most actual growing, which is appropriate for a 12 and a 14-year-old. Like, that is the time in life when you change the most. You move from childhood into adulthood, and especially in an environment like this post-apocalyptic world that we've grown to discover. What about your favorite quotation?
I feel like we should start doing these earlier because you end up taking them all.
So you say yours first.
Well, no, but you always end up saying them earlier in the show.
That's okay.
My favorite quote is the "I love you, I've always loved you," because that is there's something about, like, a horror movie that can be as scary as this is, and then also, like, be so emotionally rich as well. Mm-hmm. So, that was just a great point. But also, I said in my notes, also sequence between Lee and Marcus at the waterfall.
Yeah.
Where they're talking about, where Marcus is basically telling him, like, she blames herself. She thinks you hate her.
Which is so devastating as a parent when you realize that you've hurt your child without realizing it. Like, oh gosh, that's hard. My favorite is actually, who are we if we can't protect them? Because I think that in our identity as parents, that is a huge piece of it. If I cannot protect my child, then I have failed. Like, that is my number one job. And the world is such a scary place, and there's so much I cannot control. And so who am I if I'm not able to protect my child?
Which was Evelyn who said that.
Yes, I think so. I can't even remember. I didn't even write it down. It was in that conversation they were having. It was either her or Lee. I should probably.
No, it was definitely her.
It was her. Cool.
Because she said something about that multiple times about.
Oh yeah.
Like, earlier in the film, she said it's your job to protect them.
Right.
And then later on, after the baby's born, and there's all this tragedy that's going on around them, that she says that.
Right. So good. So good. And also, not a lot of lines to choose from. This movie had like 90 lines of dialogue in 90 minutes. There's not a ton. All right, cool. I guess it's time for us to sing our songs.
Time for us to hit the open mic. This week's songwriting gimmick, our boundary that we randomly selected was called flashback, which means that basically it's sort of set in the past or in the past tense or in a prior time, or however we decide to interpret our songwriting gimmick, right?
Yep.
All right. Shall we decide who goes first?
Let's do it.
Oh, no.
Oh, no. You have nothing to flip.
All right. I'm going to flip this coaster that has Rachel's face on it.
You made those coasters a long time ago.
Yeah.
Back in our early days.
This might just turn to dust when it hits the ground.
Oh, no.
All right. Your heads. And
I'm heads, and then the back of it is tails?
Yep.
Okay, great. How about heads?
Heads it is. You get to pick.
I would like to go first this week.
Let's get set up.
Let's do it.
Let me plug your keyboard in.
Let's do it.
All right. Open mic time. See you in a minute. Hear you in a minute. Listen. This is running long and I'm losing my brain. We're gonna do the music now.
Let's go.
Shortly after this brief break.
Who are we if we can't transition?
Ladies and gents, we proudly present
For your listening delights, this week's Open Mic.
All right, so now that I'm here at the piano, I was flipping through my notebook, I realized that as we've written this, our 20th song, that I may be drawing on some similar melodies to something I've done before, perhaps even as recently as 2 weeks ago. But the choruses are totally different, but the verses might sound reminiscent of one another. But that being said, sometimes that's what happens when you write a song. So this is called Before Times. I don't know if there's a hyphen in there or not, but this is specifically about how the family's weakness, specifically Reagan's weakness, became a strength afterwards. And it's not the happiest song in the world, but it is what I captured as I was thinking about this film. So here we go. This is Before Times. I was weak, but now I'm strong. I was always in the wrong. Never did really belong. And I wish it was still that way. The before times with all the reason and all the rhyme. Even if it was not my time, we were better off that way. In the before time. I would give it all to be unheard and so small, rather than this ill befall everyone and everywhere. I miss the before times with all the reason and all the rhyme. Even though it was not my time, we were better off that way. In the before time. The grass is always green, but you never know what isn't seen. You don't know quite what it means till your feet are planted on that ground. I miss the before times with all the reason and all the rhyme. Even though it was not my time, we were better off that way. In the before time. This journey, it has changed me, and I'm stronger than I used to be. But the cost has been too high for me. I'd still give anything I had to go back to the before times. All the reason and all the rhyme. Even though it was not my time, we were better off that way. In the before times, all the reason and all the rhyme. Even though it was not my time, it all made more sense that way. I miss the before times.
Woohoo!
All right.
I thought that was a really good performance, too.
Thanks. I had only one or two hiccups with some funky rhythm things in some of the words, but I feel like this is like 75% done, which sometimes just happens. Sometimes songs come easy and all formed, and sometimes they don't. So if we do decide to work on this one more, I love some input and insight. I'm not married to anything on the page right now.
I really like that Disney chord in the...
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, that came out so naturally when I was writing. I was like, yeah, I know it's kind of cliche. I mean, we've said it before. I have a lot of musical theater influence. I grew up on a lot of musical theater, so I definitely have some of those shows in my lyrics and in my music sometimes. But yeah, I'd love to work on it a little more. It's not like my favorite thing that I've put out there, but I think I caught a little bit about, I think sometimes it's easy to romanticize. Like we talked a lot about how Reagan's deafness was a weakness before, but then became a strength. But like she would still totally go back to it being a weakness if it could mean going back to a world before crazy aliens and people dying and stuff. So yeah, that's it. Before times.
Fantastic. Well, I think there's a good chance we're going to record yours because I stole the last couple of weeks. So,
well, I mean, stole one, earned.
Well, it was also...
and timing.
We also, it has to do with the amount of time because usually it takes me a little more time to work on my own songs because I don't sing as pretty as Rachel. And also, I have a playlist on Spotify for like this year's songs, and that actually I think we're fairly balanced now because at the beginning of 2026, I think you went back to back a couple of weeks.
I definitely did. There was a few weeks I went back to back. So yeah, I mean, I think it just it depends on the week and the time and the songs and what we have. But yeah, I'd love to work on this one more. But either way, it's here at the open mic for posterity now.
Dig it.
All right, cool. Let's get switched up.
All right. I'm all set up. And I was just reminding Rachel that we've actually, I think, recorded 22 songs, or written, I should say, 22 songs each, because we also did songs for the Top 24 of 2024 episode and the Top 25 of 2025 episode, along with all the deep dive movies. So check your math, girl, as I always say. She doesn't have a microphone yet. Microphone. That's what I call it now. We're using new technology. Also, in like the last half hour setting everything up and listening to Rachel, I've developed some sort of chest allergy thing going on. There is a lot of pollen. It's not an excuse, but in writing my song for A Quiet Place, last week my song for whatever the movie was we did before this, what was it? Intruder. Intruder?
Was it?
I don't think so.
Yeah, it was Intruder. No, Smile, and then Intruder.
It was Smile. Yeah, my song for Smile, the guitar part was hard. And so I decided to make this easier on myself. I kind of wanted to do kind of a punky punk kind of song. But in writing a song that was easier on my guitar playing, I wrote one that was harder to sing. So we'll see how it goes. It is called Breaking Our Silence.
We used to live in peace before the world was left in pieces, before this dis-ease, before this war that never ceases. We did everything exactly like our parents said we should. There was no second guessing, 'cause we barely understood. We took it for granted. We thought that we were timeless when we were stranded. Our lives were left behind us, we barely standing. No strength left for defiance. There's only harm in breaking our silence. We used used to love this place, but now we're all just hiding away before it all fades, before there's nothing left for taking. We did everything exactly like they taught us back in school, but now we're empty-handed and there's nothing we can do. We took it for granted. We thought that we were timeless, then we were stranded. Our lives were left behind us, we're barely standing. No strength left for defiance. There's only harm in breaking our silence. So there's no use in breaking our silence. There's no use. We did everything exactly like parents said we should, but there was no second guessing, 'cause we barely understood. We took it for granted. We thought that we were timeless, then we were stranded. Our lives were left behind us, we're barely standing. The strength left for defiance. There's only harm in breaking our silence.
God damn it. All right. First of all, your easy guitar playing is still better than any guitar playing I've ever done. And second of all, how could we possibly do my song when you just wrote that banger? That was so good.
It was pretty good, right?
It's a really good song. I really liked it. And one option, and we can talk about this off mic, but I would love to sing that song if you bumped it up or down a fourth. We would have to play around with
we might be able to do it together, I was thinking.
Yeah, that's a really good song. Just I mean, like it's just super catchy. Nice job.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was really good. I don't even know what else to say except you had me rocking out over in my mic-less chair over there.
I don't know what happened in the transition from like the breakdown section back into the last pre-chorus. I don't know if I missed a chord somewhere or something, because
It's okay.
Not like that.
I didn't notice and nobody else noticed either, because it's the open mic, and unless you point out your mistakes, usually people don't notice them, or they're just so...
I know, I was just like literally confused when I got there.
No, that was a really fun song, and I would love to come up with some sort of collab on the demo. I think that would be cool. But yeah, great work.
Thank you, thank you.
You're welcome. Let's get back into our usual seats, and because we're losing light, as we say.
All right, we'll wrap it up.
All right, cool.
All right, we're losing light.
Yeah, we are.
I really enjoyed watching this movie with you and talking about it.
Yeah, this was great. I'm so glad we spun this.
Yeah, it's all every time I watch this movie, which I've seen it a couple more times than you have, I'm always reminded of how freaking good it is.
Exactly.
That being said,
time to spin a new movie.
Yes, and I think by our encore episode next week, we don't know what we're going to do for that yet. Let's have figured out our schedule so we can know when the Jaws episodes are coming. They're coming in July. We know that, but I want to make sure I don't spin a movie on the week, like before we're doing the Jaws or whatever.
Oh, yes. Hold on a second.
While she's doing that, let me tell you what the movies are on our Wheel of Horror. The Wheel of Horror, of course, is the spinning wheel I spin to determine what movie we'll be watching next. It's completely random. And currently on the wheel, we have Sleepaway Camp, Pieces, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Alien, It Follows, Rosemary's Baby, A Nightmare on Elm Street, Child's Play, Weapons, 30 Days of Night, Audition, and The Strangers, and Carrie. And of course, we also have 3 spaces now for the ever elusive sequel. If we land on that, you'll see what happens. It's how we are going to pick a sequel for one of the movies we've already previously covered. All right, so here we go. What are we going to see next? Our next movie will be Rosemary's Baby.
Yay! I am so excited about that. I've got like a crazy deja vu. I felt like maybe we talked about that recently and we're like, I can't wait to spin it. That's awesome. This is a great...
It's one of my all-time favorites.
Yeah. Oh, and actually, no. Do you know why? Because we just put it on the wheel like last time. Because we were just talking about how some of the themes that we can talk about and talking about art versus artist and all that kind of stuff, which we will definitely be bringing up. This is a controversial film because of the director.
And let me spin for our songwriting gimmick.
Oh, let's do it.
Split perspective.
Okay. Is that where we split the movie in half?
No, that's first half, second half.
Oh, okay. What's split perspective?
Maybe it has something. So here's the problem. I had a list of all the descriptions and I've misplaced it.
Oh, no.
So I'm going to update that. So
Okay,
then
great.
we'll have a full definition. What should I can't even say it. Split perspective be? I think maybe if part of the song looks at the perspective from one person and then the other half from another person or multiple people. But so the song has to encapsulate not one perspective, but more than one.
Okay. I like that.
Right.
All right.
Well, and we'll see you in 2 weeks with Rosemary's Baby Deep Dive. Next week, please join us for our encore. We're going to come up with something good. Maybe we should do a draft again or some sort. We haven't done one of those in a while.
Ooh, I like that idea.
And as always, you can find us wherever you socialize on the social medias at OMNLDpod. You can also email us at omnldpod@gmail.com. Rate us, like us, comment on our things. We've been putting up more videos on social medias, me being goofy and Rachel being controversial with her opinions. Specifically about, what was that called? Send Help.
Yeah, it was. Although it turned out not to be as controversial as I thought it was based on the reviews I had read. So maybe the algorithm just gets me. But yeah, join us on social media. Let us know.
And I look forward to Rosemary's Baby, one of my favorites, but we'll cover that in 2 weeks' time.
All right. Thanks for hanging out.
Alrighty. And make sure you keep very, very quiet. See ya. Bye.